Shalom, and welcome to Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Mensch-Kight. In this podcast, you'll hear detailed and relatively unbiased information about Israeli politics and current events. Not as much interesting news this week as there was last week, but I do have a few interesting stories for you. Finance Minister Israel Katz says Israel is going to end its lockdowns and return to what they call controlled activity, an increased level of normalcy. They also intend to have relief for small businesses and such coming soon for those who've been locked down and shut out of their businesses. But with the vaccination efforts having been so successful, Israel is now able to return to a greater degree of normalcy. On the Iran front, the Biden administration says they're going to have to make some kind of a policy statement in the next 7 days. Iran has passed a law in December that says they will end all international inspections of their nuclear facilities by the 21st of February. So they're forcing the hand, I guess you could say, of the international community in the United States. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of that, but I don't hold much hope that the Biden administration will be able to come up with anything that will actually encourage Iran to stop its nuclear program. The Iranians seem to smell weakness on the administration and are looking to take advantage of it, whichever way they can. So we'll have to see how that goes. Israel will soon be receiving an ambassador from the United Arab Emirates as part of the Abraham Accords, and that is a major step in terms of normalization with the Arab world. As the accords were signed last year, slowly but surely, normalization has been taking its course, and now the swearing in of an ambassador by the UAE to send to Jerusalem is a major step that brings normalization this one step closer. Now the two governments have ambassadors in each other's capitals and embassies in each other's capitals, and the ability to communicate formally through diplomatic channels with one another, rather than having to communicate, say, through third parties or mediators. So this is, again, a major step forward in the Abraham Accords. Since it's a slow news week, I'm going to go ahead and finish the political party descriptions that I started earlier in the podcast. I've described Likud and the secular right parties. I've described Gideon Sa'ar and his platform and his new party. I've discussed the secular right parties and the ultra-Orthodox Haredi parties. And, of course, the Arab parties and the split with Ra'am running separately. It is now time to talk about Israel's center-left. And I'm going to begin with the center-left and then move leftward, so we can cover all of the bases here. The first party on the center-left, and an interesting new turn, let's just say, a new leaf in Israeli political history, is Yesh Atid, the There Is a Future party, which was founded by Yair Lapid in 2012. Yair Lapid is a former journalist and author and TV anchor, who was popular in Israel before he ran in the Knesset elections in 2013. Yair Lapid is the son of Tommy Lapid, who ran the Shinui party, and that party was committed to a balance of the social spending in Israel and removing the special privileges for the ultra-Orthodox Haredi population, forcing a new sort of equality on all of the Jewish residents of Israel. Those who are studying in yeshiva are not a special class of people who deserve special rights and privileges that do not belong to the rest of Israeli society. Yair Lapid continues in that vein. He's taken on the project of structural reform, corruption reform, trying to prevent corruption in the Knesset and reduce the influence of big money on politics. He is more dovish than a lot of other politicians. He has called for a united Jerusalem and the retention of most of Israel's communities in the Shomron and Yehuda. As I've talked about before, the international media calls that the West Bank, but it is properly termed Shomron and Yehuda, Samaria and Judah, the mountainous ridge that runs in the center of Israel, the historical home of Jewish people, if you read the Bible. So this is a major step for him. He's dovish, more so than, say, Bibi Netanyahu, not as skeptical of peace, but a united Jerusalem and retaining most of the Israeli settlements or communities, as I like to call them, in the Shomron and Yehuda, puts him in a more center-left position. Yair Lapid also supports capitalism, entrepreneurship, and the growing high-tech economy in Israel. He wants to focus on teaching science and math and advancing Israeli innovation and Israeli, let's say, research and development, the massive growing tech economy in Israel. Now, I've told you I'm going to claim my biases, and I'm going to try to be as honest as I can. And so I'm going to have to claim a bias here. I like Yair Lapid. I found it somewhat strange when I left the U.S. being center-right in the U.S. I assumed that I would fall in with the center-right in Israel. But I find that looking at the issues, especially the ultra-Orthodox, I have a tendency with social issues, with issues domestic to Israel, to fall in line more with the center-left, with Yair Lapid. When it comes to security issues, I have a tendency to lean, as you might have noticed, in more the Likud direction, in the sense that there's a need for a strong national security for Israel. But I like to think of myself as following very much in the vein of Ze'ev Jabotinsky, that Israel should be a free market, an entrepreneurial country, a secular country where all Jews are treated fairly and equally, and that it should be a prosperous, innovative, entrepreneurial state that, we didn't, as Jabotinsky talked about, we didn't move to Israel. Jews didn't move to Israel to confront the Arabs. We came to live in peace. And Jabotinsky sought a peaceful cohabitation, let's say, between Jews and Arabs in Israel. He even proposed a rotation of Jewish and Arab prime ministers. So that didn't turn out that way, and there's been a lot of enmity and war since then. But the hope continues to remain that that type of Israel could be established. And we're getting there, especially with the Abraham Accords, which I will talk about more in a coming supplement. In any case, Yair Lapid represents somewhat of the, let's just say, slightly to the left side of the Ze'ev Jabotinsky agenda, in my opinion. He does not represent the old left, the socialist left. He represents a new capitalist left that is more populist. And I'll have to go into a little bit of political theory because this term gets thrown out there a lot, populism. Populism, as I see it, is differentiated from idealism. So when you say someone is an idealist, or an ideologue, they are a person who supports a certain agenda. And as an example, let's say, using America as an example, a Rush Limbaugh or a Ted Cruz is a conservative ideologue. This is a person who holds to a conservative agenda regardless of what's going on in the country. They don't care whether it's popular or unpopular. They advocate and advance their agenda. So that is an ideologue. Likewise, on the left, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, these people are ideologues of the left. They are always supporting and advancing a left-wing agenda, regardless of whether that is popular, right? A populist is a person who follows the popular will, who is focused on maintaining their public popularity as they advance political causes. Examples of populists include people like Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, even Barack Obama, people who advance, at least in their presentation, their sort of charismatic presentation to the people, an agenda that is popular and maintain their popularity with the people as a primary goal. If you look at the sort of the discussions back and forth between Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, which is a relationship that I strongly recommend. There's a great book out there about Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. It's incredible read. So if you have not read much on those two, check it out because that is a great work. In any case, the major difference between the two, the disagreement seems to be that Margaret Thatcher wanted to advance her agenda first, regardless of whether it was popular, and Ronald Reagan wanted to maintain his popularity first, rather than necessarily advancing his agenda. And so that tells you the different priorities. So a populist, like Yair Lapid, is someone who, although he is ideologically left of center, he maintains a popular position. So he is advancing popular causes like fighting corruption, cleaning up the government, running as an outsider, trying to seek constitutional reforms and things of that nature. So this is Yair Lapid. I like Yair Lapid, and I really liked his structural reforms, or constitutional reforms, you might call them. Israel doesn't have a constitution, which is why I fall back on the term structural reform. Again, in a future supplement, I'll be describing why that is. But Lapid advanced, for example, raising the threshold from 2% to 3.5%. And ultimately, in a compromise, he settled for 3.25%. Were a number of changes to the electoral law made at the time, reforms that kind of cleaned up the election system. And again, he, by raising the threshold, trying to drive voters to vote for larger political parties rather than dividing their votes up among a number of more niche parties. As I've described before, it can get, you can splinter over hair-splitting issues, and they don't seem to make much difference to somebody. And it's a lot like that Monty Python skit, right? The People's Front of Judea, Popular Front of Judea, he's over there, splitter, right? So you can get these tiny little issues that can split political parties up. Yair Lapid wanted to drive voters or encourage voters to vote for larger political parties. And those larger political parties that take on much bigger issues then are able to coalesce more easily into coalitions. They have broader interests. They're not stuck on one or two little issues like the ultra-Orthodox, say, earning special privileges for their community. So this is Yair Lapid. I like Yair Lapid. I think he has a lot of potential. In terms of how Israelis perceive him, he is considered a popular left-wing politician, again, center-left. A lot of people on the left do not appreciate his populism because a lot of Israeli left-wingers or leftists are very ideological. They're focused on the kibbutz lifestyle. They're a little bit more communal. They believe very strongly in the role of government in people's lives. And so when a center-left candidate like Lapid comes forward and he supports capitalism and entrepreneurship and innovation and this kind of thing, that's not really their cup of tea. So that crowd tends to vote for the traditional left, parties like Labor and Meretz. Now, when you look at Yair Lapid's crowd, again, it's the center-left people that are in that vein of Kadima. When Ariel Sharon split from Likud and created the new center-left that really destroyed labor, but a capitalist, strong security-minded left that is skeptical, more skeptical of the peace process, let's say, than labor and the traditional left, but not as skeptical as the right. And that new vein of Israeli politics, that center-left, really harmed labor. Labor went downhill after that, once that vein had been opened. Unfortunately, Ariel Sharon had two strokes just as Kadima was forming, as it was running in its first election as Kadima, and the party fell into the hands of Ehud Barak, who was not a very effective leader of it. That's my opinion, but it also is borne out in fact, if you will, because Kadima's electoral success dropped significantly. When Ariel Sharon was leading the party was polling at 49, 50 seats. As soon as Ehud Olmert took over the party, Ehud Olmert dropped the party's support down to 29 seats, and they just barely got that 29th seat. So you can see how the party collapsed in popularity under Olmert rather than under Sharon. And that after 3 years of government, and Olmert later went to prison for corruption, Kadima just collapsed. They were not able to maintain the lead in the government. They just got one seat more than Likud in the 2009 election, and after that, they just didn't have the support of the Israeli public. Their polling numbers were abysmal. So Yair Lapid stepped into that vein, seeing the potential that was Kadima, this strong security, center-left. Let's have fair distribution of social welfare benefits, no special privileges for the Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, and fight corruption. So he was able to play the role of the outsider. And so he formed this new political party, Yesh Atid, there is a future, and focused on that capitalist, scientific, and innovative approach. Now, Lapid was polling early on at about 12, 13, 14 seats for the election in 2013. At the last minute, and this is something that happens in Israeli elections, so this is an excellent opportunity to talk about it, there can be a last-minute shift where a certain number of voters will, at the last minute, decide on a candidate that they did not speak for in the polls. Not a huge shift, just a few percentage points, but it can make a difference. And in this case, it did. At the last minute, a large block of center-left voters shifted over and voted for Yesh Atid, bringing Yesh Atid all the way up to 19 seats in 2013 election. And with those 19 seats, Yesh Atid became the second largest party in the Knesset, just as it's polling in second place now, right behind Likud. I should say right behind. They're polling around 17 seats. Likud is polling around 29, 30 seats. So almost, a little bit more than half of Likud seats, but in a strong second position, well ahead of the New Hope Party founded by Gidon Sa'ar, which is polling around 11, 12 seats, right? So Yair Lapid and his Yesh Atid party are the largest left-wing party, and it is predominantly because he's taken that sort of center-left position. In terms of how he's perceived, originally he was very popular. He was seen as a possible future prime minister. Obviously, having 19 seats in the Knesset in 2013 made him put him in a very powerful place. I mean, he had jumped ahead of all of the other parties, a brand new political party jumping into second place. That's huge. He joined a coalition with Bibi Netanyahu, and he served as finance minister. And I'm going to take this moment to talk about the finance minister's job. This is a thankless job in any government. In the U.S., the Secretary of the Treasury doesn't quite have the same role as the finance minister in a parliamentary system. But in most parliamentary governments, the finance minister is the guy everybody loves to hate, the guy or the gal. This is the person whose job it is to say no. We want to build a new road. No, we can't afford it. We want a new social program. No, we can't afford it. We want to build a new tank. No, we can't afford it. He's the guy or the gal, she's the gal, who has to say no, 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 no to everyone and balance out this budget because, of course, everyone has a pet project. Everybody wants to increase spending on this, increase spending on that. Or in the case of those who are interested in reducing the size of government, we want to cut spending on this and cut spending on that. And it's the job of the finance minister to say, no, 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 we're going to maintain things very much as they are. Generally speaking, changes in finance come very slowly in parliamentary systems with a little bit of balance. Radical changes in the pursuit, say, of austerity, which is what is the international term for a balanced budget. It's called seeking austerity. So if you're trying to eliminate your deficit and you're making cuts, there are very few radical changes that are proposed. Usually it's a slow, gradual process to reduce spending. And so you just say no to new spending while you slowly kind of cap spending and try to keep programs from bloating or growing, and eventually you'll reach a balanced budget. So the finance minister is a thankless job. People who want to cut the budget, people who want to grow the budget, people who have pet projects they want to fund, you're never their friend. And so in Israel in particular, the finance ministry is where you send politicians to die. Several popular politicians go into the finance ministry with all kinds of love and adulation and roses and kisses. And then by the time they've served as finance minister for a year or two, they are, thrown out on the street. Don't let the door hit you in the back. We don't want to see you again. We're not even going to put you on the party list. Get out of here. Don't call us. We won't call you. So this is where you send people to die. And Bibi Netanyahu, as I've noted, is a clever politician when it comes to new political leaders. So he often sends people to these jobs, thankless jobs like the finance ministry, where they go to die. And he's done this to a number of politicians who could have been competitors of his. Yuval Steinitz, a major Likud member who served as finance minister, Moshe Kolon, a few others who've gone to this job and had all kinds of promise and popularity only to die. Curiously, the finance ministry is also a place where some politicians thrive. Bibi Netanyahu was made finance minister in 2003 by Ariel Sharon, and this is where he revived his political career by advancing a number of free market political policies and leading to the growing innovation in the Israeli economy. Now, if Netanyahu was able to prosper there and thrive and restore himself to political credibility with the finance ministry, having that job has generally been the dead end to most political careers of those who serve in the office. So he gave that job to Yair Lapid somewhat deliberately. Now, I want to say Lapid did not exactly swim, but he didn't exactly sink either. In this unpopular job, he was able to maintain a certain balance between advancing popular reforms and being the no man, who has to say no, no, no to everybody's pet projects and proposed cuts. But he advanced to structural reforms like the rising threshold and changes to the election system, and he continued to press for peace talks and engagement in the peace process, even though the Netanyahu government has been at something of a standstill with that. The Palestinians refuse to talk to him, and Netanyahu doesn't feel like jumping through the hoops, the so-called preconditions, in order to enter into talks. Well, Lapid then made a major political miscalculation. In 2014, there was a couple of things going on. You have Naftali Bennett pushing for reform to the Basic Law, which sort of Israel's constitution. Again, Israel does not have a constitution, but the Basic Law is the structure under which the Knesset operates. And he wanted to amend that to include language clarifying the Jewish and democratic character of Israel, that it's a Jewish democratic state. So that was something the right was pushing. And then at the same time, there was this growing effort on the left to unseat Netanyahu that year. Bibi had been in office for a good 5.5 years, headed on towards 6 years, and the Obama administration looked to unseat him and actually spent a considerable amount of U.S. tax dollars as part of the effort to remove Bibi Netanyahu from office. The left took that cue, if you will, and that energy, and they formed a new center-left party, the remnant of Kadima, along with Labor, they called Zionist Union. And somehow Yair Lapid was drawn into the same whirlwind. He kind of swept up with the storm. So he resigned from the government and early elections were called. If you look at the articles I wrote at the time in the Times of Israel, which are available through my website, where you can look at all of the articles I've written in Times of Israel and Political Vanguard, you will find that at the time I wrote that the most likely result of those early elections was going to be a more right-wing government. It was extremely disappointing to me. I, for one, was very pleased that Israel had a center-right government, that Netanyahu and Likud were balanced with Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party in the coalition. And Lapid's leaving the coalition was a disappointing moment. Ultimately, the statement I made turned out to be prophetic. Israeli voters turned out in large numbers. Bibi Netanyahu and his government were reelected, and a more right-wing government ended up being sworn in. So this was a coalition of farther right parties, and Lapid has been in opposition since then. His party fell to 10 seats in the 2015 election from 19, so basically got cut in half. But Yair Lapid did not go to the trash bin, the trash heap of history, and fall like most, I wouldn't say most, almost all Israeli politicians who get stuck in that kind of rut. He was able to rehabilitate himself and stay in the political game, again advancing his populist agenda. And now as an opposition leader, he was able to advance that agenda, no longer from the position of being the no man in the government as finance minister. He's now once again the outsider, and that makes it easier for him to advance that anti-corruption, against the machine, against the establishment agenda. So Lapid has rehabilitated himself. Come 2019, Yair Lapid worked together with General Benny Gantz to form Yesh Atid into the blue and white party that Benny Gantz was leading as an effort to get rid of Netanyahu. By 2019 election, Bibi had been in office for about 10 years. He was the second longest serving prime minister at the time and on his way to being the record holder, which he ultimately achieved, outdoing Israel's founder, David Ben-Gurion, as the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history. But in 2019, there looked to be an opportunity to unseat Bibi Netanyahu, and so several parties took the the approach that they would not join a coalition with Netanyahu. And Lapid joined in with that. So this was I want to say, the second major political mistake he made in his career, because joining with Benny Gantz has proven to be problematic. On the other hand, he's rehabilitated himself from it nicely, so I can't really complain. Yair Lapid was seen as a possible prime minister early on. Blue and White Party was running on the idea that Benny Gantz would be prime minister for 2 years and then Yair Lapid for 2 years, so we'd have all of the talent of the center-left in office, and it seemed to be a promising time. I, for one, was never all that excited about Benny Gantz. I didn't trust him. Israeli generals have a tendency to be on the left. Israel's military is more left-wing in terms of its upper leadership, more traditional left, socialist left. And oftentimes the more dovish crowd tend to be the higher military leaders. Not always, but oftentimes. So I didn't really trust him, and I didn't expect much from him, although he disappointed even that. So they ran together, and they did okay in the first election. No government was able to form, so another election was held, and another, and now we're on the fourth election because these parties cannot form a coalition. Netanyahu has not been able to win an outright majority and form a government, and neither has Lapid and Benny Gantz been able to gain enough seats to form a coalition on their own. So this is the standoff that we've been in for the past 2 years that's led to 4 elections in Israel. Now, Benny Gantz did ultimately split from Lapid and run separately, and then formed the unity government with Netanyahu earlier this year, or rather in 2020, I should say. So that's last year now. In the spring of 2020, they formed the unity government to address the coronavirus crisis so that Israel would have a stable government during that time. That decision proved to be a very unpopular one for Benny Gantz, whom I'll discuss next, so we'll talk about that more. But Yair Lapid seems to have survived that very well. And as you see, he's now polling at around 17 seats. He's back in second place. And so 8 years after he jumped in the fray of Israeli politics, Yair Lapid is here to stay. He is still seen as a potential prime minister, as I talked about in the polls last time, when you compare him, say, to Bibi Netanyahu as a head-to-head. There tends to be a broader support for Netanyahu. He's not incredibly popular as a prime minister candidate, but he is well positioned. And in terms of those on the left, he is the most popular left-wing politician at the present when it comes to a possible candidate for prime minister. So look for Yair Lapid to have a long career. Will he be prime minister one day? A lot of people believed when he joined Israeli politics and jumped in the ring that he would be. And his second place finish in 2013, and then again, he's back in second place now, certainly are promising, and we will see. Again, in terms of any anti-Netanyahu coalition that might form, they're going to need Yair Lapid's votes, and he's probably going to have more seats than Gideon Sa'ar, so let's see how that goes. Benny Gantz jumped into politics and formed the Blue and White Party, which refers to the colors of the Israeli flag, back in 2019 as an effort to unseat Bibi Netanyahu. Benny Gantz has been a general in the IDF and a leading military figure in Israel for some time, so he's seen as having strong security credentials. And that was hoped by those on the center-left that having those strong security credentials and, say, the backing of Yair Lapid, who has strong domestic policy credentials and is popular in domestic policy, that the two of them working together, or at the very least Benny Gantz's presence in a coalition, would strengthen the center-left against the claims by the right, by people like Netanyahu and his allies, that the left is weak on security and that only the right can be trusted with security. This is the position Benny Gantz tried to fit into. As soon as he got into office, however, he began to make some statements discussing the possibility of various compromises with the Arabs as part of a peace deal. He also, in a trip to Saudi Arabia, made a statement suggesting that Jerusalem might be a divided capital, or a capital for both a Jewish and Arab Palestinian state. These kinds of statements have weakened his position as a strong security leader, as someone who represents a skeptical and strong leader when it comes to peace negotiations. He seems a little bit more like a sellout at this point. And he has definitely besmirched his reputation, both by joining the coalition with Bibi after he swore up and down that he would not, and by making statements that suggest that he may be somewhat weak-hearted when it comes to Israeli security matters. So that's where Benny Gantz is. His popularity has collapsed. His party is down to around the electoral threshold, 3.25%. He may earn 4 or 5 seats in the Knesset. Will he be incredibly relevant? Who knows? In a center-left coalition, if one is able to come together that forces out Bibi Netanyahu, he's certainly a prime candidate for, say, defense minister, or to have a high cabinet position in the government, but he's no longer a candidate for prime minister, not with numbers like that. So our candidates for prime minister right now seem to be, as I discussed last time, Bibi Netanyahu, obviously, but also Gideon Sa'ar, Yair Lapid, and Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett, curiously, as a possible prime minister, given that his party's polling around 11, 12 seats, and that he is to the right of Netanyahu, which is a little bit of a surprise. The Israeli right has certainly rehabilitated itself. That concludes another exciting episode of Inside Israel News. Hope you'll look us up on the web at insideisrael.news or on Facebook at Inside Israel News Facebook page. And with that, I will say, Lehitrot, goodbye.
אולי נפליגה בספינות מחוף אילת עד חוף ועל המשחטות הישנות יטעינו תפוחי זהב. כל זה אינו משל ולא חלום, זה נכון כאור בצהריים. כל זה יבוא מחר אם לא היום.